Kids have imaginary friends all the time, right? That's what I told myself when my daughter Emma started talking to Lily. At first, it seemed normal, just another phase, another figment of her young, creative mind. But now I know better. Now I know Lily was never imaginary. It started when we moved into our new house near the lake. Emma was just 6, excited about her new room, her new backyard, and everything that came with it. But within the first week, she began talking to someone who wasn't there. Lily says she used to live here, Emma would say. At first it was cute. Kids say weird things. But then Emma started mentioning details she shouldn't have known. Things about the house, the lake, and the people who had lived here before us. And then one night I heard a second voice whispering back. A voice that wasn't Emma's. At first I dismissed it. Kids have wild imaginations, right? But things started getting strange. Emma would set a place at the dinner table for Lily. She'd talk in hushed tones in her room, pausing like she was listening to someone. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I'd hear her giggling, softly like she was trying not to wake us up. One day I asked her casually, "What does Lily look like?" Emma's answer made my stomach drop. "She's my age. She wears a white dress, but it's always wet. And her hair is long and black, but it covers her face because she doesn't like people looking at her." The way she said it, so casually, so innocently, sent a shiver down my spine. Then, Emma's behavior started to change. She became quieter, more distant. She didn't like playing outside anymore. She started drawing strange pictures, her and Lily standing by the lake, but Lily's face was always missing. One night, I heard Emma whispering in her room again. I stood outside her door, listening, waiting for her to answer Lily. But she wasn't the one talking. The second voice, soft, wet, wrong, whispered something back. I flung the door open, but Emma was alone, sitting up in bed, wide-eyed. She turned to me and in the coldest voice I'd ever heard, whispered, "She says you shouldn't have done that." That was the first night I realized Lily wasn't imaginary. She was real. After that night, things got worse. Emma wasn't just talking to Lily anymore, she was listening. She'd stop mid-sentence, tilting her head like she was hearing something I couldn't. Sometimes she'd nod slightly, whispering, "Okay, I will." Her drawings became even more disturbing. One in particular sent a chill through my bones. It was a sketch of our house, but the windows were blacked out. And standing outside near Emma's bedroom window was a girl in a wet dress, her long dark hair covering her face. Then the scratches started appearing. Small red marks on Emma's arms and legs. At first, I thought maybe she was scratching herself in her sleep. But then I saw them, thin, deep scratches on her back. Places she couldn't possibly reach. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Emma didn't even look up from her coloring book. Lily gets mad sometimes. I felt the air leave my lungs. Mad about what? This time she did look up. Her blue eyes were empty. "She doesn't like when you check on me at night." That night, I locked Emma's bedroom door. I don't know why, I just knew I had to. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I woke up to the sound of Emma's doorknob rattling. The sound of tiny fingernails scratching the wood. And then, I heard her voice. Not Emma's. A voice too wet, too wrong. "Let me in." I lay frozen in bed, my breath caught in my throat. The scratching at Emma's door didn't stop. It grew more frantic, more desperate. The voice, too, became more insistent. "Let me in, please." It wasn't Emma. It couldn't be Emma. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and turned on the flashlight. As soon as the light hit the hallway, the scratching stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. Slowly, I stepped out of bed and inched toward Emma's room. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear my own breath. I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. Hesitantly, I whispered, "Emma?" A long pause. Then, in a flat, unnatural tone, she answered, "She's gone now." I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Emma sat on her bed, her face pale, her eyes unfocused. She was clutching her blanket tightly, rocking slightly back and forth. I knelt beside her. "What happened, baby?" She blinked slowly, like waking from a trance. Then she whispered, "Lily doesn't like you." A chill ran through my spine. I reached for her hand, but she jerked away. I gasped, Her wrist was covered in fresh bruises, small dark finger marks. My stomach twisted. "Emma, who did this to you?" She didn't answer. Instead, her gaze flickered to the corner of the room. I turned, my breath caught in my chest. At first I saw nothing. But then, in the dim light, I noticed the faint outline of a figure. A girl, standing there, watching us. A sickening sense of dread crawled through me. My body screamed at me to move, to run, but I couldn't. Then Emma whispered something that made my blood turn to ice. "She says it's your fault. She says you took her house." The air grew heavy, pressing down on my chest. The figure in the corner twitched, like a glitch in reality, then took a single step forward. The lights flickered. The door behind me slammed shut. And then, Emma screamed. Emma's scream tore through the room, raw and terrified. I spun around just as the light flickered violently, casting shifting shadows along the walls. The figure in the corner twitched again, then lunged, not at me but at Emma. I reacted purely on instinct. I grabbed Emma and yanked her off the bed, pulling her against me. But she was thrashing, her body shaking with uncontrollable tremors. "Make her stop. Make her stop," she wailed, clawing at her own skin. But there was nothing there. At least, nothing I could see. The room turned ice cold and the air felt suffocating. The closet door creaked open, revealing darkness far deeper than it should have been. It wasn't just shadows. It was an abyss. And then I heard it. Laughter. Not a child's giggle. Not playful. It was warped, hollow. It crawled under my skin, making my stomach churn. I turned to face the closet, clutching Emma tighter. "Who are you? What do you want?" For the first time, I heard Lily's voice clearly. "You should have left." The whisper slithered through the air, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The floor beneath me creaked, the wood groaning as if under immense pressure. Then, Emma's body went limp. My heart stopped. Her eyes fluttered open, but something was wrong. Her pupils were blown wide, black swallowing the blue. A slow, unnatural grin spread across her lips. "It's okay, Mommy." Her voice was Emma's, but not. Something else was speaking through her. I backed away, but she grabbed my wrist, her fingers ice cold. I tried to pull free, but her grip was inhumanly strong. "You don't have to fight." Emma's head tilted, too far to be natural. "You can stay with us." The laughter returned, louder now. Closer. The closet door was open wide. A hand, thin, pale, too many joints bending the wrong way, crawled out from the darkness. And then Emma pulled me toward it. I fought against Emma's grip, but her fingers were unnaturally strong, digging into my wrist like cold iron shackles. "Emma, let go." My voice trembled as I struggled, my feet dragging toward the closet. The hand from the darkness twitched, its fingers crawling across the floor, reaching for me. Emma's blackened eyes stared up at me, unblinking. "You can stay, Mommy." "No." With all my strength, I wrenched free and grabbed Emma, throwing us both backward onto the bed. The light above shattered, plunging the room into complete darkness. Then silence, a breath, right against my ear. "You can't run." I grabbed Emma and bolted. The door locked. I pounded on it, screaming, "Let us out! Let us out!" The walls began to shift. The wallpaper peeled, revealing something underneath, faces. Twisted. Screaming. The entire room was alive. I turned back just in time to see Emma collapse onto the floor, convulsing. "Baby, wake up." I shook her, my vision blurring with tears. Then, her lips moved. But it wasn't her voice. "You never should have opened the door." A force yanked her back toward the closet, her body sliding across the floor. I lunged, grabbing her ankles, pulling her toward me. Something pulled back. The shadows inside the closet formed a shape. A woman. Hair covering her face. A jagged, slashed mouth stretched into a grin. She whispered, "She belongs to me now." I refused to let go. Summoning every ounce of strength, I yanked Emma toward me, tearing her away from the shadow's grip. The closet slammed shut with an ear-splitting bang. The entire room lurched like the walls were breathing one final time before falling still. And then, silence. I held Emma, shaking, whispering over and over, "It's okay. It's over." but as I looked down I saw her face. She was staring at the closet. And then, she smiled. At first I thought my son had an imaginary friend, until I saw the scratches on his arms. Ethan had always been a quiet, imaginative kid. We had moved to this house just a few months ago, a small place near the edge of the woods. He wasn't the type to make friends easily, so when he started talking about a boy named Oliver, I thought it was cute. Oliver says he used to live here, Ethan told me one night at dinner. I smiled. Oh yeah? What else does Oliver say? Ethan shrugged, poking at his mashed potatoes. He says he doesn't like you. I froze for a second, then laughed it off. Kids and their wild imaginations. But then little things started happening. I'd find his bedroom window unlocked in the morning, even though I always checked it at night. His toys would be lined up in perfect, unnatural symmetry. And then one evening he came home from playing outside, his arms covered in long, deep scratches. I grabbed him. Ethan, what happened? He looked up at me, his face pale. Oliver got mad, he whispered. He said I shouldn't have told you about him. I cleaned Ethan's scratches, but something about them felt wrong. They weren't random marks from rough play. They were too deep, too precise, almost like tiny hands with sharp nails had raked across his skin. Ethan, where did Oliver scratch you? I asked carefully. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the window. In the woods. A chill ran down my spine. We lived near a thick forest that stretched for miles. I had warned Ethan never to go too far in. But kids don't listen. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made my stomach twist. At 3:12 a.m., a sound jolted me awake, soft scratching. I rushed to Ethan's room. He was sitting up in bed, his fingers dragging down his arms, scratching himself. His eyes were wide, staring at something in the corner of the room. I turned quickly, nothing was there. Ethan. I grabbed his hands, stopping him. His skin was freezing, his breath shallow. He's mad, Ethan whispered. Oliver says I wasn't supposed to tell you. The air shifted behind me. A whisper. Not Ethan's voice. I spun around. The room was empty. But the closet door? It was open. And I was sure I had closed it before bed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Ethan's scratches, his whispers about Oliver, and the way he stared at the woods, it all felt unnatural. So the next afternoon, while Ethan was at school, I went into the forest myself. The deeper I walked, the more the trees pressed in around me, the air dense, suffocating. Then I saw it, a rotting treehouse half hidden behind tangled branches. It looked ancient. The wood was warped and dark with decay, the ladder missing several rungs. A foul, damp smell oozed from it. I hesitated before climbing up. Inside, dusty toys lay scattered across the floor. A stuffed rabbit missing an eye, an old metal lunchbox, a deck of cards faded with time. But then I saw something that made my breath hitch. A child's shoe half buried under a pile of leaves and dirt, its fabric blackened with age, and something else, something darker. I backed away, my pulse hammering. Someone had lived here. Or something. That night, I did what any terrified mother would. I started researching. And I found it. A missing child case. Decades ago, an 8-year-old boy named Oliver Jensen disappeared near these very woods. His body was never found. The last place he was seen? Playing by the tree line. My stomach dropped. Meanwhile, Ethan had grown quiet, detached. He spent hours by the window just watching the woods. Then that night I woke up to soft giggling. Ethan's giggling. But when I reached his room, my heart nearly stopped. He was alone. Sitting in the dark, staring into his open closet. And in the silence, I swear I heard his second breath that wasn't mine. Ethan wasn't the same after that night. He stopped talking to me. Stopped eating properly. Stopped acting like Ethan. Instead, he spent hours sitting by the window, his lips moving silently, like he was talking to someone I couldn't see. One night, I caught him standing at the edge of the woods, whispering, "Ethan." I called, my voice sharp with panic. He turned slowly, his face pale in the moonlight. "He doesn't like it when you interrupt," he said flatly. My skin prickled. "Who doesn't?" Ethan smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was too wide. Too unnatural. Oliver. A cold sweat broke over me. I grabbed his arm and pulled him inside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something watched us from the trees. That night, I locked his bedroom door from the outside. It felt wrong, but I was terrified. At 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of scratching. Not just from his room. From inside my own closet. I held my breath, my pulse roaring in my ears. The door creaked slightly, like something was pressing against it from the inside. Then in the darkness, I heard Ethan's voice. But it wasn't coming from his room. It was right outside my door. "Mommy, let him in." I couldn't breathe. Ethan's voice was right outside my bedroom door, but I knew that he was still locked inside his own room. The scratching inside my closet grew louder, more desperate. "Mommy?" The whisper outside my door turned into a slow, dragging knock. "Let him in." My whole body locked up. I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, the knocking stopped. Silence. Then a giggle. A soft, breathy child's giggle from inside the closet. I bolted. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I ran straight to Ethan's door, fumbled with the lock, and threw it open. He was awake, sitting upright on his bed, staring at me. Only his eyes weren't right. "You weren't supposed to lock me in," he said, voice eerily calm. My stomach twisted. "Ethan, what's going on? Who's Oliver?" He tilted his head, considering. Then he smiled. A slow, knowing smile. Not his smile. "He lives here," Ethan whispered. "Before we did. Before all of you did." I shuddered. "What are you talking about?" Ethan's head jerked suddenly, violently, like something yanked it to the side. He let out a choked gasp, his body convulsing for a second. Then he collapsed. My scream echoed through the house. I rushed to him, shaking his shoulders. "Ethan, wake up." His eyelids fluttered. His breath hitched. Then he blinked up at me, dazed. "Mom?" His voice was small, confused. Tears burned my eyes. "Oh my God, Ethan, what happened?" But before he could answer, his gaze drifted to something behind me. His face twisted in pure terror. And then he started screaming. Ethan's scream was raw, terrified, unnatural. I spun around, but nothing was there. "Ethan, what is it?" My voice cracked, my hands gripping his shoulders. His breathing was rapid, his eyes wide with horror. "He's standing right behind you, Mom. Watching you." A chill crawled down my spine. I wanted to tell him it wasn't real, that he was imagining it, but deep down I knew. Something was in this house. "Oliver," I whispered. Ethan flinched at the name. His little hands clutched my arms like a vice. "He doesn't like when you say his name." His voice trembled. I swallowed hard. "Ethan, we need to leave. Right now." But he shook his head, eyes filling with tears. "Mom, we can't." My chest tightened. "Why not?" He hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Because he's inside me now." A shiver ran through me. Ethan collapsed into my arms, shaking. His body felt cold, ice cold. His breath was shallow. I lifted him, heart pounding, and rushed toward the door. As soon as I touched the doorknob, slam. The whole house shuddered. Every door slammed shut at once. The lights flickered wildly. Then footsteps. Heavy, slow, dragging, coming from the hallway. Ethan whimpered in my arms, burying his face in my shoulder. "Mom, don't move," he whispered. "He's coming." The air turned thick, suffocating. The footsteps stopped just outside Ethan's room. Then, a child's voice. "You shouldn't have locked me in." The lights went out. Ethan screamed. And then, nothing. Just silence. They found me the next morning, alone. The front door was wide open. The house was freezing. But Ethan was gone. No sign of him. No fingerprints. No evidence he was ever there at all. The police searched everywhere. They questioned me for hours. They didn't believe me when I told them. They think I lost my mind. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still hear it. A faint knock on my bedroom door. And a child's voice whispering, "Let me in." Rachel Carter had always believed that childhood imagination was a beautiful thing. So, the first time she heard Noah talking animatedly in his room, she didn't think much of it. Kids had imaginary friends all the time. But something about this one felt different. One evening, while setting the dinner table, she called out to her son, "Noah, dinner's ready." Noah came skipping into the dining room, but before sitting down he turned back toward the hallway and whispered, "Come on, Daniel, you can sit next to me." Rachel felt a shiver crawl up her spine. "Who's Daniel?" Noah grinned. "My best friend." Rachel forced a smile. "Oh, is Daniel from school?" Noah shook his head. "No, he lives here." Rachel hesitated. "You mean, like in our neighborhood?" Noah giggled and picked up his fork. "No, Mommy. He lives in my room." Rachel's hands froze over her plate, but she quickly brushed it off. Kids and their wild imaginations. Later that night, after tucking Noah into bed, she stood outside his room for a moment, listening. At first there was silence. But then a whisper. She peeked through the door crack. Noah was lying on his side, facing the empty space beside him, whispering softly. His little fingers twitched like he was playing with someone's hand. Rachel's stomach tightened. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. "Noah?" Noah sat up quickly, startled. "Mommy? You scared him." Rachel's breath hitched. "Who?" Noah pouted. "Daniel. He doesn't like to be seen." The air in the room felt colder. Rachel forced a laugh, trying to keep things light. "Okay, buddy. Time to sleep." As she closed the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was in that room watching her leave. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At first, she had dismissed Noah's Daniel obsession as childhood imagination, but little things around the house started making her question it. Toys were never where she left them. She'd organized Noah's room at night, only to find his action figures lined up facing the closet by morning. The closet door, always slightly open no matter how many times she shut it. It was the cold that unnerved her the most. Some nights, she'd feel an icy draft drift through the hallway, even though all the windows were locked. The air would suddenly feel heavy, like someone was watching her. But Noah, he seemed happier than ever. At dinner one evening, Rachel placed a plate in front of Noah, only to watch in confusion as he slid an extra plate beside him. "For Daniel?" he said matter-of-factly. Rachel exchanged a glance with her husband, but neither of them wanted to make a big deal out of it. "Sweetie, Daniel doesn't eat," she said gently. Noah frowned. "That's not true. He told me he used to eat here all the time." Rachel froze. "Here?" Noah nodded, chewing his food. "A long time ago. Before you came." That night, unable to shake her unease, Rachel decided to go through the attic. Their house was old, and she figured she might find something interesting about its past. Digging through dust-covered boxes, she found an old family photograph. A group of children stood outside the house, all dressed in clothes that looked at least a century old. Her stomach dropped. One of the boys in the photo had pale skin, dark hollowed eyes, and old-fashioned clothes. Noah's exact description of Daniel. Rachel couldn't sleep that night. The photograph haunted her. Who was that boy? And why did Noah know what he looked like? The next morning, while Noah was at school, she drove to the local records office. The house had stood for over 100 years. Surely there had to be some history. She dug through old newspapers and property records until something made her stomach churn. Decades ago, a boy named Daniel Whitmore had lived in their house. One winter night, he vanished without a trace. No body. No explanation. Just gone. Rachel's hands trembled as she read the details. His parents had searched for years, but eventually they moved away. The town whispered about the disappearance, but with time, Daniel faded into history. Until now. That evening, Rachel watched Noah closely. He was quieter than usual, sitting on the floor, staring at the closet. "Noah?" she called gently. He didn't turn. "Daniel doesn't want you looking for him." Rachel's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Noah finally turned, his wide eyes eerily calm. "He says you're making him angry." A chill ran down her spine. That night, Rachel lay awake, every sound in the house magnified. Around 2 a.m. she heard something, whispers. Soft, urgent. She tiptoed to Noah's room. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Noah sat up in bed, his gaze locked on the dark hallway. Rachel's voice barely came out. Noah, what are you looking at? His small fingers curled around the blanket. Daniel wants you to play too. Rachel's blood ran cold. She flipped on the hallway light, heart pounding. Nothing. Just shadows stretching across the floor. She forced a smile. Sweetie, there's no one there. Noah didn't move. He's hiding. A chill wrapped around Rachel's spine. She knelt beside Noah's bed, gently gripping his shoulders. Listen to me, okay? Daniel isn't real. He's just. Noah's breath hitched. Don't say that. His voice trembled. He doesn't like it when you say that. Before Rachel could respond, the closet door creaked open. A gust of icy air brushed against her skin. The lamp on the nightstand flickered. Rachel's pulse thundered in her ears. Her fingers tightened around Noah's arm as she turned to look inside the closet. Nothing. Just hanging clothes swaying gently. Then Noah whispered, "He's mad." The lamp shattered. Rachel screamed, pulling Noah into her arms as a heavy force slammed the closet door shut. The entire room trembled, books tumbling off shelves, toys sliding across the floor. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a vicious wind. The words were distorted, inhuman. Rachel grabbed Noah and ran. But as they reached the front door, it refused to open. The knob wouldn't turn. She yanked harder, but an invisible force pushed her back. Noah clutched her hand, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, he says we can't leave." The air thickened. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Rachel turned, chest heaving, as a dark figure stood at the end of the hallway. Daniel. For the first time she saw him, pale skin, hollow eyes, dressed in tattered old-fashioned clothes. And he was smiling. Rachel's breath hitched as Daniel took a slow step forward. The air around them thickened, pressing against her chest like an unseen weight. Noah clung to her, trembling. "Mom, he doesn't want me to go." Rachel's mind raced. She had to end this, somehow. Then she remembered the old photograph. She bolted toward the living room, dragging Noah with her. The moment they entered, the walls trembled, books flying off shelves. A cold, guttural whisper filled the air, "You can't take him." Rachel grabbed the old family photo from the coffee table, Daniel's solemn face staring back at her. The air turned electric. A force yanked at her wrist, trying to pry the photo away. "No!" she screamed, shoving Noah behind her. She fumbled with the lighter on the fireplace mantel, her hands shaking violently. Daniel's voice echoed through the house, his words warped, otherworldly. "He's mine." Rachel flicked the lighter on. The small flame danced wildly. "Mom?" Noah's voice was different now, low, almost detached. Rachel turned and her heart stopped. Noah's eyes had darkened, his lips curling into an unnatural grin. Not his grin. Daniel was inside him. Tears blurred Rachel's vision as she forced herself to do the only thing she could. With a deep breath, she pressed the flame to the corner of the photo. The moment the fire consumed Daniel's image, the house screamed. The walls shook violently. A deafening wail filled the air. The shadows twisted and writhed before exploding into nothingness. Noah gasped, collapsing into Rachel's arms. Silence. The front door creaked open. It was over. That night, as Rachel tucked Noah into bed, he sleepily whispered, "Daniel says he'll come back."